Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is the last day of the decade. Okay, so I know it's not the last day technically of the decade, right? But who actually counts like that? When the midnight strikes tonight, you know, for all intents and purposes, outside of the technical definition, we're going into a new decade. But of course, I know someone is going to be in my mentions and say, it's not a new decade, Dixon. Well, congratulations to you on being technically correct, but socially obtuse. But anyway, it is Tuesday, December 31st, 2019. Thank you so much for joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. I've been up. It's 5:48 in the morning right now. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning. I have a sleeping disorder now, or I think it's just called old age, where I used to see my parents, my grandparents, whenever I hung out with friends and they had older parents or older grandparents, I used to watch them all wake up at 4:30 in the morning religiously. And now I'm that person. If I don't take some sleeping aid, I will be up at 4 or 4:30 on the dot every night, no matter what time I went to sleep. And I'm only saying that because my voice is surprisingly awake at 5:48 in the morning. That's because I've been up for an hour and 48 minutes. Now, all that said, all those pleasantries, I imagine we won't do a show tomorrow since it's a holiday, but I don't know. I enjoy doing it so much that maybe I'll get around to doing one. But let's just jump into something that has been trending on Twitter since last night. And it's worthwhile discussing beyond, Twitter. Like, Twitter sometimes is irrelevant, but there's a hashtag trending. It's okay to be white. Hashtag it's okay to be white. I could talk about this all day. I won't. Don't worry. I'm not going to commit more than 7 minutes. As soon as the patron music comes up, I'm going to exit off this topic. But I want to talk about this topic because it never fails that while somebody in one breath is saying it's okay to be white, that they naturally attach every identity associated with power, the default structure of power in this country, to that whiteness. It's not just okay to be white. They're going to include, or they are including in it, it's okay to be white and conservative. It's not just okay to be white and conservative. It's okay to be white conservative men. It's not okay just to be white conservative men. It's okay to be white conservative Christian men. And ultimately what this has become is their regular, semi-annual exercise of feigning marginalization. And what I mean by that is about twice a year, they like to pretend that being a white man Christian in this country is the hardest position to be in imaginable. And the way they draw that, they draw that conclusion, besides being disingenuous, right? Besides not being good faith actors, besides using that as a way of sustaining that power, the way they come to that conclusion that it's difficult to be a white Christian man in this country is by comparing themselves to the plight of people who are trying to find equality and get equality in this country. Simply put, they feel white Christian men and the women who love them, generally the white women who love them, but you have to throw in Candace Owens for good measure. They generally feel that the more rights that anyone who is not a white Christian man get is an affront to their freedom and to their rights. In other words, they view rights in this country as a zero-sum game. They most certainly view economic and political power to be zero-sum games. And so any group that is increasing in their economic or political power, vis-a-vis increasing their rights, their ability to organize, their ability to demand from the system something that is specific to their identity, white people, white Christian men, see that as an attack on them. And as a result, they have concluded that it's more difficult to be a white Christian man in this country than it is to be, I don't know, a black trans woman, a Muslim black trans woman. And so there he is. I mean, there it is. I think I'm done with that because that's the fixation. That is the obsession. But it's also a political ploy. It's a tool. It's a tool to sustain power and to maintain power, to keep power from marginalized groups. Because they understand the power of victimhood. They would understand that, right? Because they created the greatest pool of victims in the history of this planet. They have oppressed more people in the history of this planet than any other group. The outright murders during the Crusades, all the way down to Jim Crow, all the way down to the violence that we see that's perpetrated against marginalized communities today. I'm going to keep saying this. White Christian men, conservative white Christian men, and the white women who love them, plus Candace Owens, they are the theological descendants of the Crusaders. People who would gladly use the name of Christ and kill you for the sake of economic and political power. That's who they are. And so they have historically created probably the largest pool of oppressed and marginalized people for the purposes of maintaining their own political power and expanding their empire, whether it be the empire led by the Catholic Church in the 12th century, all the way down to Jim Crow. And let's not forget slavery and everything that happened in between. So these are the direct theological descendants of those people who manipulate religion for the purposes of political power. Now they're in a position where they're trying to do their own type of political jujitsu and say that because, let's say, a trans woman or a Muslim woman, because they are fighting for their rights to simply exist, that now they are the oppressed. White people are oppressed. It's funny that they view political power and economic power as a zero-sum game. And if they then admit that political power and economic power is a zero-sum game, then clearly we can look at the sheer number of white Christian men who are in political power in this country and economic power in this country and automatically definitively define the fact that they are the oppressors in this country. Because listen, I'm not making the rules. These are their rules. They feel as though simply appealing to the humanity of society and ensuring that everyone is created equal and everyone has equal opportunity in this country, and that people with differing identities can simply exist the way they are. White Christian conservative men and the white women who love them, plus Candace Owens, they feel that it is an affront to their rights, an affront to their political and economic power. So they have set up the rules, right? They have defined all of the system to be a zero-sum game. Fine. Let's look at the number of people in political power. How many of them are white Christian conservative men? Let's look at the number of people who are billionaires and millionaires in this country. How many of them are white Christian men, right? We already know this country is built. The rights in this country were first given to white Christian men. So if we play by the rules that these people who created this hashtag, it's okay to be white, if we play by those rules, they have inadvertently identified themselves as the greatest oppressors on the face of this planet, while trying to feign as though they are the oppressed, as though they are the ones who are marginalized by the very rules, by their very complaint. In an effort to define themselves as victims, they have clearly outlined exactly why they are the victimizers.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
And here we go. Come on. All right. We have 3 new patrons this morning. Very special welcome. Very special welcome to Damon Thompson. Thank you, my friend, for becoming a patron. Very special welcome to Clyde Wilson. Thank you for becoming a patron. And very special welcome to Sunny Ruby Okino. Thank you, my friend, for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious family. Matter of fact, why don't we do it like all of these politicians are doing it right now? Bring the music down. Bring the music down. We're going to do it like the politicians do it. This is the end of the quarter. We have some reporting to do. We have some deadlines to meet. This is urgent. Right now in your email inbox, you have at least 3 emails just like that. At least. Probably 10. Well, it's the end of the quarter. This is the last day of the year. Last day of the decade. I believe that we can get at least 5 patrons to sign up before midnight tonight. Matter of fact, if we get 5 patrons to sign up before tonight, I will do a live stream at, man, I just sold myself cheap. I should have said 10. But if we get 5 new patrons, I will live stream between 11:30 and 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Just kind of as a way to celebrate the new year. Actually, let me narrow that down from 11:45 to 12. And including libations and all. Like, we're just going to have a party and I'll be streaming live. I don't know if it'll be video live. Okay, here we go. I've got it. 5 new patrons by midnight will stream the podcast live. 10 new patrons by midnight will stream video live. Why not? I do politics all day. Why not operate like a politician for once? All right, let's get to the next story. So, Joe Biden has announced that he is willing to consider a Republican as a running mate, as a VP pick. This happened yesterday in an interview. Now, before I go off on him completely, I want to give the full context, or at least all of what he said. He said if he found somebody that he could work with and run, as a VP, that he would consider it. But right now, he doesn't see anyone who he could pick. Okay. So basically, he said, if there was a good Republican, I would pick them as a running mate, but I can't find any good Republicans. All right. So there you go. That's as much context and good faith that I'm going to give this guy. Because more importantly than his caveat is the fact that there is still this sentiment in this country that you can work with Republicans and get something done. When above all else, Joe Biden, I keep saying this, but where was he during those 8 years of Barack Obama? And let's cut it down to 6 years because he had a majority in the House and the Senate in 2009, 2010. So let's cut it down to 6 years. Those 6 years, hell, bump that, include all of those years, because during the time that he had majorities, Barack Obama was trying to push through a Republican piece of legislation, and Republicans said, no, we're going to pretend as though this conservative piece of free market, a windfall program for insurance companies, a windfall profit machine for insurance companies, we're going to pretend as though this is socialism. So where was Joe Biden for the 8 years of Barack Obama's administration when Republicans showed that there is no working with them, that they will take your attempts at bipartisanship and they will shove it down your throat? Where was he? I don't know. But there's a subtle subtext here that I can't help but see. It just screams at me. It screams at me that he thinks that he's more qualified to get Republicans to work with him than Barack Obama was. You can fill in the rest of the blank. Why? What would give him that? What, despite all of the evidence that Republicans will scorch the earth on every single issue, no matter who, what, when, where, how, or why, just for a cheap political win, Joe Biden thinks the signal that he needs to send to America is that he's willing to work with Republicans. Never mind, I'm putting aside the fact that he's alienating his base or his potential base, because we're not going to support him. Never mind the fact that he is pushing America to the right, to the detriment of all of the movements, all of the organizers, all of the people on the ground that are sincerely galvanizing a progressive movement, progressive policies. Never mind that. He thinks that this right move in this moment is to signal to America that he's willing to work with Republicans. Well, that's the problem, Joe. It's not that Democrats haven't been willing to work with Republicans. It's the fact that Democrats have been willing to work with Republicans. For some reason, I think that made sense. The problem isn't that Democrats weren't willing to work with Republicans. The problem is that Democrats are willing to work with Republicans, and Republicans know that. They understand that they can always get this country to move further and further to the right because Democrats are desperate to work with Republicans. And Republicans will hold the line even if that means seeing this country burn to the ground. So this is yet another thing that is disqualifying for Joe Biden. He does not understand the times. He is living in a dream world. He's living in a different era. He's living in a time that quite frankly, I don't know that it actually existed, because if you look at America since 1981, Republicans have been heading in this direction. I mean, okay, I will give George H.W. Bush some credit. A little credit, but that's it. But most certainly since Newt Gingrich became Speaker of the House underneath Bill Clinton, what was that, like, or 94 when Newt took power? Republicans have been playing this scorched earth politics of taking no prisoners, never giving an inch, and always taking a mile. And Democrats, like Joe Biden, have been going to happy hour with them to enjoy a scotch and a bourbon, all the while sacrificing principle. They've been celebrating the mechanisms of our country, the institutions of our country. They've been heralding all of the achievements that they accomplished, but those achievements have all been right-leaning conservative achievements. So I don't think that there ever was really a time where Republicans were willing to work with Democrats. It's that Republicans have always manipulated the fact that Democrats want to work with them. Bipartisanship is not by default a two-way street. In fact, we've seen quite the opposite. Bipartisanship in this country means Democrats capitulating to Republicans and Republicans never giving an inch to anything remotely Democratic or left-leaning. Okay. So yesterday morning, we woke up and we saw President Bernie Sanders trending #1 on Twitter. I woke up this morning to see Neera trending #1 on Twitter. Neera being Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress, the best funded, quote unquote, progressive think tank on the face of the planet that is anything but progressive. And as everyone felt so inclined to tell me that's why they're the best funded. I mean, I get it. I totally get it. Thank you for pointing that out, all 300 of you in my mentions. But I digress. She's trending on Twitter, and she's trending because of a spat that she had around Bernie Sanders and him not being a Democrat. Particularly David Sirota, who is working for Bernie Sanders' campaign, the journalist who is working for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and David Sirota calling out Joe Biden's attempt, as I covered in the last segment, attempt to work with Republicans. It's a lot of it's a little in the weeds, a little bit, but allow me to bring it up to the 30,000 foot level. Neera Tanden, who is the one of the most influential people in the country, has probably the largest budget of any progressive organization. You can probably combine every other progressive organization and still not meet the budget that Center for American Progress has. Neera has a vested interest in ensuring that that Bernie Sanders does not become president. I've covered this on the show before. But I got to double down on this. I have to triple down. This will be my third time covering it, if my memory serves me correctly. The people who are fighting the hardest against Bernie Sanders, they are the establishment. People who came in and have been in Washington, D.C. since the Clintons. Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden was a part of the Clinton White House. Neera Tanden was, I believe, she was a chief of staff for Hillary Clinton while she was senator. She assisted Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, and then she took up the role of president of the Center for American Progress. So she has been in D.C. for a long time. In fact, I believe she even worked with Michael Dukakis's campaign. She's been trying to get to D.C. for a long time. She got to D.C. and she is entrenched power. She is the quintessential member of K Street. And there's more than just her. So this isn't really just about Neera Tanden. There's so many other individuals who have been in Washington, D.C. as a part of the Clinton machine and as a part of the Obama machine. And they have enjoyed the spoils of what it means to be a DC insider, a DC influencer, to the tune of millions of dollars, probably more than what we would ever know. The influence, the ability to make kings and queens, the ability to have their message resonate through the country and to control the narrative. And can you imagine what it feels like to see that slipping away? To see that slipping away. And here's the thing. It's slipping away even in the face of Bernie Sanders' defeat in 2016. That has to be terrifying. Whereas they thought Hillary Clinton beating Bernie Sanders in 2016 would end the revolution, the quote unquote revolution. I use that term loosely, but we'll call it what they call it. Fine. It's a revolution. They thought that they had put that to bed, but the revolution got bigger. The movement got stronger. The Overton window got even further to the left, and the demands became more vociferous. We are absolutely making a purity test out of Medicare for all. Andrew Yang is getting ready to go down because he's playing around with Medicare for all. Elizabeth Warren, her numbers tanked, and now she's coming full circle, trying to come back to Medicare for all. Love you, Liz, but it is what it is. And so can you imagine seeing this empire of influence in the seat of global empire? Like, you are one of the most influential people in the most influential country on the face of the planet, and seeing that power slowly slip away to a bunch of ragtag people who've never been in DC. Some of us probably never even gone to DC. Don't even know where K Street is. Wouldn't even know how to contact someone from Saudi Arabia except for saying something negative about them on Twitter and having Twitter do it for you. Yeah. So they're losing power, they're losing influence, and they're losing it even if Bernie Sanders doesn't win. The movement wins and the movement continues. And so what does that mean? That means I think Neera is in my age group. I think she's I don't know. She's not over 50 yet. So that means in the years that should be her most influential years, most people really get in their stride for power around 50. That means we have the opportunity to make her rather irrelevant. Or, she'll never be irrelevant, but she certainly can lose influence. And that is exactly what is terrifying her. It's terrifying the media. It's terrifying billionaires, because not only are they going to lose influence, but they're going to lose money with the wealth tax from Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. They're terrified of losing their status and their position, and it's starting to show. And to be quite honest, that's enough reason to have another party in this episode. Yeah, everybody bop their head. It pains me to report. Oh man, that clap. That joint's bop. Anyway, it pains me to report that even Senator Ted Cruz, I hate to do this to you, but whenever I hear Ted Cruz, I can't help but think about the fact that he ate a booger live on television in the last presidential debate he was in. Oh God, that just made me kind of sick to my stomach. Eddie Monster, Ted Cruz. It pains me to report that he's even better than Pete Buttigieg on the issue of slavery. This is the quote that Ted Cruz shared in response to the story that I reported yesterday. Pete Buttigieg saying that the founding fathers didn't understand that slavery was a bad thing. This is what Ted Cruz shared. He said, quote, slavery is he's quoting someone else. So he's quoting the quote. Here it is. Slavery is an evil and colossal magnitude, and I am utterly adverse to the admission of slavery into the Missouri territories. It being among my first wishes to see some plan adopted by which slavery in this country may be abolished by law. John Adams, founding father, second president of the United States. It pains me, ladies and gentlemen, to ever admit that Eddie Monster actually has made a good point. But, I mean, when you're so wrong, when you are so utterly wrong that even the booger-eating senator from the state of Texas can grandstand on you, I think it's time to call it a wrap for your campaign. Last but not least, yesterday I started a conversation about what to do with Progressive Army. And I want to clarify a couple of things as well as expand on it. I had a chance to talk to my homegirl, Noah Changa, last night. She's one of my partners at Progressive Army. I still haven't had a chance to talk to my other two partners, but if they're still listening to the show, guys, hit me up. But I want to clarify. So to be sure, the people who have worked at Progressive Army all of these years that we've had it, I can name names, but if I start naming names, I'm not going to name enough. But to be sure, the squad that writes, they generally are already working with progressive organizations, and very actively so. So yesterday when I said I want to convert Progressive Army into an organizing support group, a team of volunteers that go around that in their own city, you don't even have to go around the country. When I said this yesterday, I'm not speaking of the people who are already on the team because they're already doing that. I'm speaking of you, the listener, you. And I have enough listeners. I mean, it's not a big show, but I have enough listeners that I think in probably every state, and this is, again, I have a small show, so don't laugh at what I'm getting ready to say. But in every state, we can find 5 to 10 listeners who would organize themselves and go to support organizers. Can you imagine? And I said this yesterday, but again, I'm getting kind of redundant, but I just want to highlight the amount of assistance it would give organizations that need help just to have 5 more people show up. And I think it would be hella dope if those 5 people who showed up had on Progressive Army t-shirts and were trained already to understand how to canvass, how to knock door to door, the best practices. I think that's something that I'm very serious about doing in 2020. And I'll talk to my other 2 partners later on today and see if we can make a plan so that you as the listener can become the activist. All right, that's it for today's show. Be sure tonight, 5 new patrons. We're going to stream live between 11:45 and midnight, and probably 12:15. We'll hang out a little bit more. 10 new patrons, and we'll stream video via YouTube as well as the podcast. See you tonight.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.